Hello, world, and welcome to the Innovation Coaching Podcast. My name is Klaus Hostel, and with me today, I have Bob Carruthers. Bob, tell me how I can help.
Well, today I've been doing this a long time. I've been a Vistage chair for 29 years.
Wow.
I've coached a lot. I have thousands of hours of coaching others, not a lot of hours of me being coached,
Ah,
so it's always been going out, not coming back. So one thing I'm struggling with is call reluctance.
oh, call reluctance. Tell me more.
Yeah, as I have over the years as I have had my practice wane and grow and you know my CEO members come, they sell their company, they leave, so I have another slot. What I do is I run peer advisory groups
Nice.
in a maximum, and so a good number in the peer advisory group is 18, because these days people are so busy and there's so many conferences and trade shows and all demands on their time that we'll probably have four miss.
Hmm.
So I like a good group of 14 so we can have great discussions and help each other in a lot of ways.
I like that.
And when I lose members, it's I have to go out and replace them.
Hmm.
And sometimes I don't get the referrals I need. They come and go. And so I have to get on the phone and do cold calling, which is hard with CEOs to even get in to talk to a CEO is hard,
Yes.
you know? Yeah. So I I have a fear of that, I guess. I don't know. I just don't do it.
Got it. So it's not just hard, it's you actually don't do it.
Yeah, right.
So it's not that you're doing it and it's terrible, but you're just not doing it.
Right. It's getting in my way of success. I mean, I'm successful anyway, but when numbers go down, my income goes down.
Sure, because they're helping pay the bills.
That's exactly right. So I'd like to be able to keep the group at, the 18 number. So it pays very well there. When it drops, it goes down.
Got it.
Kind of it in a nutshell.
Okay, that makes sense. So let's attack that problem for a moment. Really interesting, and thanks for bringing that. So first off, does the group work even at smaller numbers? Does it work if you have six or 10, or is it then too small to function properly?
No, it works. I mean, if we get down to three, it probably wouldn't, or four,
Sure.
but they'd sure be on me to build the group. And but we still have great conversations.
Got it.
But to give them the experience they need, there needs to be more points of reference in the room, more experiences, more things that a larger group can bring to an individual member than a small group.
Got it. Got it. Okay, but that's a nice start because that gives security, right? Because if you have
Mhm.
18 and it works with 14 because some are elsewhere, and it also works with 10 and it could even work with seven or eight,
Right.
then you don't have to worry when somebody leaves, right? If you're running a basketball team with five players and two leave, then you're in trouble, right? An NBA team minus two players is not going to do well no matter how good they are.
Right.
Got it. Okay, but that's good. So that gives flexibility there. The second is, do you have other, I know it's also to give them a better experience, but the income is not to be dismissed.
Mhm.
Do you have other big streams of income next to this, or is this like a prime thing?
No, this is it. This is it. Off and on, I'll do outside coaching, but this is it.
This is the main thing.
Right.
Got it. Okay. So that's interesting and a very nice model, actually. How do you attract them? Like you don't do cold calling, which I understand. It's a tough business, especially if you're trying to reach high level people.
Hmm.
How do you attract them except for word of mouth and somebody met you 10 years ago and they still think you're brilliant? How do you do any thought leadership? Do you do any like established presence so they can be drawn into your net in a nice way?
Yeah, I'm out. I'm in a networking group here in Denver that is a bunch of service providers, all top class that I belong to. And I'll get referrals from them. I get referrals from my members. That's where I really want them to come from.
Hmm.
And I get them just because I've been around a long time. So
That helps.
So people know me and often they'll call me up.
Do you have any, I call them buttons you can push, right? So like if you write a LinkedIn post, it's a button you can push and it might not give a lot, but something will come out of it if you do enough of that. If you go ringing doorbells, something will come out of that. If you publish a book, something will come out of that. All these sorts of like things you can do, buttons you can push. And some of them are big buttons.
Right.
Going to a week-long trade show in Mexico is probably a big button. Writing a LinkedIn post is a small button. Do you have any good buttons that you can push?
Well, I'm doing LinkedIn posts twice a week,
Hmm.
and often with what's going on in the groups, what are we hearing, general information that people might want to know
Hmm.
about leading a company or human or HR problems or HR opportunities or whatever. And so those come out twice a week. And now I'm doing podcasts and I'm having some success at that on leadership because I've worked with lots of leaders and I've seen how it works and what doesn't work and
Hmm.
what's important. So I'm just sharing my knowledge on that. And people seem to like that. I want to become I want to become a thought leader.
Sure. When you say you're doing podcasts, you're on mine right now, which is nice. Do
Right.
you have a podcast of your own?
No, I don't. And frankly, I don't have the time.
Got it. Got it.
Mhm.
And is that for the conversations or for the whole setup and all the stuff around it?
It's for the whole setup around it. It's for the editing. It's for the
Sure.
finding people to be on the podcast. I mean, there's a lot of behind the scenes work on them.
Yes. Yes, yes, I know.
And at this point in my life, I don't want to take on more work. I want to just do what I'm doing, but make it very successful.
Got it. Got it. The reason I ask is that one of the nice things about podcasts is, as we know, podcasts are both nice in themselves,
Mhm.
but they're also an excuse to talk to people, right? If I write to you and say, Bob, I've got this podcast, I think you'd be great on it, then at least you can feel flattered or think, why is this guy trying to take advantage? But at least there's contact, right? It's a legitimate thing. If I just write to you out of the blue and say, Bob, I'd like you to pay me money. Then my excuse is weaker, right? A podcast is a brilliant excuse to get to talk to people. Some of them will say yes, some of them will say no. But the key thing is that there are many of these excuses, many of these alibis for interaction.
Sure.
And I had a thought. Tell me if you've already done this. You do these twice a week LinkedIn posts, really nice. And I'm assuming they are like standalone pieces that if I put them into, if I made them into like a one pager, then they could stand alone, right?
Right. Yeah, they could.
And that means, let's take, how long have you been doing that?
Well, I've been doing it now for a couple months.
Okay. So you're building a library of these one pagers.
That's right. And it's kind of it's a sales pitch too. At the end of the podcast, I give my contact information.
Yeah, 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 of course.
Yeah, but I do have a library of them.
Yes. And I'm sure there's more where that came from, right? You've probably written more over the years. Do you have any books with your name on them? Any books that you published?
No, I don't.
Why don't we fix that? And the reason I say that, a little bit of backstory here. I have 45 books with my name on them. So I've been a reasonably prolific author.
Mhm.
And one of the reasons for that is I don't even like writing, but I'm pretty good at getting stuff out the door. And I managed to figure out some years ago, it's not unique, but I managed to stumble upon a nice formula for doing books, and especially thought leadership books. So if it's fiction, if you're writing the new Harry Potter, it's a whole different rule set.
Right.
But if you're writing about, let's say we're within the leadership space, which is where you are,
Mhm.
what's a specialty or like an area of leadership that you're passionate about or know a lot about?
Entrepreneurship.
Bingo. Okay, so leadership, the entrepreneurs or leadership in entrepreneurial circumstance, that sort of thing.
That
Leadership lessons for entrepreneurs, right?
exactly. Exactly.
Let's say we take some of these posts you're doing, these twice a week posts,
Hmm.
and you've been doing them for a couple of months, so they're already two times how many weeks? Let's just say it's been 8 weeks, just for the example. So that's 16 posts, and there's more where that came from.
Right.
Let's say you gather 50 of those. I'm pretty sure that you, without breaking too many sweats, can griffle down or just find in your archives 51 pagers about interesting things that are relevant for entrepreneurs in the leadership space,
Right.
like how to create teams and how to build culture and how to communicate and all that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And these are all standalone tips, but if you group them together, let's say you take 50 of them, you print them out, so they're now lying on the table. They're 50, they all have titles, and then beneath that is the actual text.
Right.
And based on the titles, if you group them, let's say you group them into 5 categories.
Okay.
One will have 12, one will have 7, one will have 14. They don't have to match, but they're like 5 roughly equal size categories. And you figure out, okay, I actually wrote 12 posts that are related to the leader as a culture bearer, and 12 and 7 posts related to the leader as an administrator, and 9 on the leader as a visionary, right? These sorts of topics will emerge when you bundle stuff together, like this clustering thing.
Right.
So now what you have is you still have your 51 pagers, except they're now clustered into 5 sections.
Mm-hmm.
If we imagine that each of these sections is a chapter in a book, and each of these pages becomes 2 pages in a book,
Mm-hmm.
suddenly you now have 100 pages of content divided into 5 chapters. It's all good stuff. It's all usable. You can just go to a random page 56 and 57, and you'll get good stuff, but you can also read it end to end, and you can use more than one tip, or you can use one, or you can use all of them.
Okay.
Or you can say, oh, this sounds interesting. Then you write an intro chapter, which is, hi, I'm Bob. I've been doing this for a long time. I'm actually pretty good at it. I run peer groups. This is collected wisdom from decades of doing this sort of thing. I hope you will find it useful. Kind regards, Bob.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a story about the grandkids, right? There's some human factor if it's there,
Right.
but most of all saying, this is the book, this is what it's for, this is why you might be interested. And then you write an end chapter, which is a short, basically text saying, you've now read it or looked at it or leafed through it. Hopefully you found something you could use. Hopefully what you learned is that leadership is not a set of facts, it's a journey, and we all learn from each other. I hope that you could use some of my thoughts. I wish you all the best, Bob.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now you've got, let's just call it 110, 120 pages of content for that book. And it's all either written already or very easy to write.
Mm-hmm.
Now you pay some poor student or somebody who does book production cheaply, $500 or something like that. Not an insane amount, a little bit of money, but not something high. And say, hey, can you do the layout magic and put it into a print layout, and then help me upload that on Amazon?
Okay.
Because now it's available, right? So if you now talk to people, you just send them that link and they can order it. Amazon takes care of printing, shipping. It's a whole package.
Wow. I didn't know that.
No, and that, no, of course, right? Because who would if you're not doing it? But it's become so simple. But the real magic, so this is the first piece of it. The real magic is then you go to your local printing house. They're around, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you say, hey, I'd like you to, what would it cost for you to print 200 books?
Right.
Soft cover, nice front page that says 50 leadership lessons from 3 decades in leadership by Bob Carruthers. Nice drawing or something, even if it's just a white thing on the front, it doesn't have to be advanced.
Right.
And they say, well, that's going to cost you a little bit of money, Bob. Maybe it'll cost you $500. Maybe it'll cost you $1,000. It won't be a lot, but it'll be money.
Right.
Now you have 200 books in your garage at home, in your apartment, in your house, wherever that looks like. And then you put them into envelopes and you send those envelopes to people whose paths you've crossed.
Right.
Former clients, former people you've coached, former people you've worked with, people that might be interesting somehow. And you put in a note and it says, dear Carl, we don't see each other often enough, but I thought you might find my new book interesting. It's about leadership lessons. I hope you're well.
Mm-hmm.
Love, Bob. And you mean it, right? This is not bullshit. This is you meaning every word, because of course you've got 200 people
Right.
whose lives you cross somehow. And then the Carls out there and the Patricias and the Ahmeds and whoever opens it, they're going to get that package in the mail. They're going to think, wow,
Mm-hmm.
Bob wrote a book. He sent it. He's such a nice guy. And there's a note and it says, P.S. I think you might like the tip on page 47, just to get them to open it. And then they look at it and say, this is serious. This is good. And then they divide themselves into 3 groups. Group number 1 puts us up on the shelf and thinks Bob's a great guy, and they never think about it again.
Right.
Group number 2 puts it up on the shelf. Maybe they leaf through it. but they don't think about it, but they're reminded of it in a view next time they're in a situation where they're like, hey, the other Carl, apparently there's two Carls in the story now, from my board of directors in the company is looking for a leadership thought circle or like a peer group. I should talk to Bob. Doesn't Bob do that? Oh, yeah, Bob had this group. I'll connect him to Bob because now you're top of mind. Now you're in their thought process. And then there's the third group, which is the really nice ones who say, this is good stuff. And they sit down and they read it or read half of it and they tell somebody about it. They give it to a friend as a gift, or they say, hey, my old friend Bob gave this, or Bob, who I worked with 7 years ago, or 27 years ago, or 3 months ago, I just got his new book. It's leadership lessons. It's really good stuff.
Hmm.
They use it in their company, or they tell a friend about it. And one of those people, maybe it's them, maybe it's somebody they know, sends that mail and says, hey, Bob, that peer leadership thing, I checked your website. I saw the new book, really good work. Do you have space in that peer website? That's the book trick.
Okay.
And is it the only way to get people in? Definitely not. But it's a way that leverages your expertise
Uh-huh.
because it's stuff you already know. You don't have to go out and invent something. You just have to take what you already have and put it into a package.
Hmm.
And number two, it uses the fact that none of us are 21, right? That you and I both come from an age where books mattered.
Uh-huh.
Because if somebody had written a book, it had gone through a whole process. So before you stood with a book in your hand, then somebody had spell checked it and layouted it and edited it and produced it and distributed it and blah, 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 all the thing. So it was serious.
Right.
And that means that if you take people above a certain age, my age and above, and I'm guessing you're my age and above,
Yeah.
maybe, right? Then we know that books matter. And the honest truth is that today anybody can upload a manuscript on Amazon.com. They can even get AI to help them. And there's no quality controls. And 3 days later, a guy in Milwaukee can order it off the internet and get it delivered in a week, and you get $599. So there's no more any quality controls, but most of us still respect books.
Hmm.
And that means when you produce a book and you're a trusted source,
Right.
then the obvious thing is not to think, okay, Bob's just going to bullshit me. Then it's, oh, Bob wrote a book. Let me check it out. And if it's not bullshit, which it isn't, it's good, then they're going to think, wow, that's pretty
Hmm.
cool. And
Hmm.
some of those, wow, that's pretty cool, are going to lead nowhere. Some of them are going to lead to conversations with others, and some of them are going to lead directly to them signing up or asking you to do something with them.
Right. Right.
It's not free, but it's reasonably close compared to a lot of other initiatives, right? The actual money cost is quite low. The production time is quite low. It's using something you know, and it's also quite fun having a book with your name on it.
Sure.
Just an idea.
I bet it is. No, I've been told many times I should write a book, so maybe I should do.
I think what I and I'm going to add, I'm going to join that choir, but I'm going to do it in a little bit of a different way because most people who write books, A, they haven't done it themselves. So they're like, you should write a book.
Hmm.
I think with 45 of my own, I can honestly say I know a little bit about book writing as a process.
Right. Right.
And two, most people think that books are this big complicated thing, and they can be, right? I recently heard a lecture about the Napoleonic Wars, and there was a guy, he'd visited, I think, 53 of Napoleon's battlefields. It took him 7 years. That's a mammoth undertaking of both time and resources. But there's also ways to do it fast,
Uh-huh.
right? Even before AI came on stage, I was down to writing books in 3 weeks.
Really?
Good books, right? Because I used the formula I just suggested, where it's basically emptying your head of stuff you already know, putting into a pretty tight but usable format, writing the intro, writing the outro, getting somebody to do the heavy production lifting if you don't know how,
Right.
paying a little bit of money, and bam, then it's out there.
Wow. That's it. That's great. I didn't know it was that easy.
Most people don't, because most of us, again, that's the downside, right? That we grew up with that books were a thing.
Hmm.
If somebody had come to you in 1986 and said, Bob, you should write a book. It'll be out in 3 weeks if you use my system. Then you would have said, oh, no,
Right.
that I don't know who you are, but I don't believe you because how could that be possible?
Yeah. Yeah.
Just the printing time is longer than that. And then there's the whole thing. But today, with the tools we have, it can actually be done quite fast if you know what you're doing. If you follow a clear structure, and that's why to me the easiest structure has been write one page about something.
Mm-hmm.
Take a subject within the bigger subject. If it's entrepreneurs and leadership lessons, then take something within that and then write one page about it, because most of us can write one page about anything that we're experts on,
Sure.
right? But writing 20 pages, then it's like, oh, what comes first, and what do I prioritize, and how do I structure it? And then it becomes complex. But one page, most of us know how to do that just by letting the fingers flow on the keyboard. And once you've done one of them, then you do it again and you do it again.
Right.
Once you've done that a couple of times, they're the length of a LinkedIn post, right? You do that twice a week already.
Mm-hmm.
There's no difference to those LinkedIn posts or to writing 2 pages every week on your new book, which is going to end up with 50 of these leadership lessons for entrepreneurs. It's the same text.
Right.
I even tell people that if you want to do this, do it as LinkedIn posts, right? Say you're going to take 30 days or 50 days and then share a LinkedIn post every day. And then at the end of that time, then you're going to have the pages for your book. Then you just need the intro, the outro, which is usually easy.
Uh-huh.
And then you need somebody to lay out, and it's done.
Okay. Okay. I'll give that a lot of thought. That sounds like it might be a lot of fun.
It's an idea, right? Will it fit into your reality? Will it seem like a good idea tomorrow? Who knows?
Yeah.
But at least there's a seed. And I think apart from the specific idea of the book, which I think would fit you and your style and your audience quite well,
Right.
then the real thinking behind it is, how do you do something that lets you showcase who you are and lets you tell people about it without being pushy?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because imagine you take the same thing we just talked about, and I send it to you as daily emails. Tomorrow you get an email saying, hey, Bob, here's leadership lessons. And you think, okay, Klaus, well, I didn't know we were on that term, but okay, I'll read it. But by the third day, you're starting to think, what's wrong with this guy?
Yeah.
And by day 50, you're either going to be in love with me or you're going to ask to have me murdered, or maybe both, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because who sends 50 days of emails with stuff? But if I take them and package them and send them as one book, it's a very different thing. Same content, very different package.
Right.
And creating that thought leadership, what I find is really tough about it is creating these packages, that packaging the information you have, the knowledge you have, in a way that allows you to speak to people without them feeling bothered.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why the books are nice, because they're an excuse in themselves, right? Send somebody a book as a gift. You're not a pushy sales guy. You're somebody pretty generous, right?
Right. Right.
Ask somebody to be on your podcast. Again, you're not pushy. You're giving them an opportunity. Write to somebody and say, hey, can we have a sales meeting? Now you're pushy.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you really hit and they're like just waiting for that and they didn't even know it. But that's usually down to more dumb luck than anything else.
That's exactly right. That's great advice.
I try. I try.
And you're a master at it, so that's good coming from you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
With that, well, before we jump on, let's flip the switch a moment, because you're a much more experienced coach than I am, and I'm not exactly a fresh yearling here.
Mm-hmm.
As somebody who sometimes, if I can pick your brain for a moment, is that okay?
Sure. Yeah.
So one of the things I struggle with is I've found that I'm decent at the coaching, right? I do stuff, I do speaking, I do writing,
Mm-hmm.
and I have a lot of people who are quite happy. Not all, but most of them are quite happy. But I find that quite a few of them, if their profile is especially older male, and especially American, not exclusively, because I have people from
Mm-hmm.
all over the world, but especially if they're like older male Americans in charge of bigger organizations,
Okay.
then I find that I run into the problem that they want some of the craziness, they want some of the energy, they want some of the wildness that I have. I go on stage in a Batman suit. I'm reasonably colorful.
Mm-hmm.
But so they want some of that. So there's some sort of attraction,
Right.
but they're afraid that if it's that fun, it can't be serious. On the other hand, they want the fun, but they're afraid it's not serious enough.
Mm-hmm.
And if I put on the suit and do the corporate lingo and talk more about ROI and kind of fit in, then they're like, now you feel safer, but not as interesting.
Right.
Do you have any advice on how to bridge that gap. And this is not only that demographic, but it's something I've run into, that the same people who are like, what makes you interesting to me is also what scares me. And if I then make myself less scary, I also become less interesting. Do you have any good advice on that?
I'm going to ask you a question.
Sure.
Are they your audience?
They don't have to be, but they can be. And I think you raise a very valid point. And I think part of it, if I'm to kind of look in the mirror a moment, thanks for that question, is it's easy to see how they could be, especially when they are the ones kind of starting the flirt, so to speak.
Hmm.
But I also see where it goes wrong.
Uh-huh.
So they could be, but they don't have to be, I guess is the answer.
Right.
And I think part of it is that I'm tempted, right? When they come dangling their big suits and their sometimes very nice budgets and say, we want somebody like you. And I say, great, happy to help. And then they say, but we're afraid to hire you.
Uh-huh.
And I say, not so great.
Uh-huh.
How do I reconcile that?
Hmm. Well, you're not always somebody's cup of tea,
This is true.
you know? I don't work with those kind of CEOs because I've chosen to work with people I have fun with,
Yes,
and there's plenty of business out there that we can all be picky about where we want to spend our time.
sure.
And unless you're getting paid $300,000 or some massive amount of money, it's you, the coach, that's worth that kind of money, set the ground rules.
I like that.
And you may say, I act like a wild man just to set myself apart, but we're in a coaching session. We are very serious.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. That framing that while that is true, it's also I like that. Thank you for that. Very useful. And I guess I'll throw a curveball in here,
Okay.
because what I find is that some of these people sometimes turn into the best client relationships once they've crossed that fear barrier.
That's right. After 2 weeks, they're there.
Yeah,
Yeah. But I think you can see that. I think when you've been doing this a long time, and I bet you have a gut feeling that tells you, is this somebody I want to work with, or that's got possibilities, or is this person going to be a pain in the butt? You know?
yep, yep, that is true.
So I think I'd be a little more discerning. The younger audience is your audience.
Yeah,
They're all for that kind of stuff, and they need more coaching than anybody. And so go after I would just go after my audience if that was me.
I like that.
Play to your strengths. Hmm.
I like that. And I guess what you're also saying, even though you're saying it in nicer words, is they may be shiny, but that doesn't make them the ones you should focus on, right?
That's right. That's right.
Well, I like that. And this is, as with, you know this better than most, as with a lot of good advice, when it sinks in, and you knew already, but it's really nice to hear somebody say it that is not yourself
Right.
and who actually is an outside voice, especially one with professional experience. So
Right.
thank you for that. Small, simple, but very much appreciated. Very useful.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Just think about it. Throw out what works and keep what does. Throw out what doesn't work. I mean,
It's always simpler when you're solving somebody else's problems, right? But it's nice having somebody look at yours. So thank you for that.
oh, right. That's exactly right.
I like that. So that also, Bob, that brings us to the wrap up phase of this. So we don't go crazy over time compared to where we started. I want to do two things here at the end.
Mhm.
The first is I want to thank you. First of all, I want to thank you for taking the time for this and saying, you know what, Klaus, I'm willing to have a conversation. I'm willing to share a thing. That takes not only courage, but also generosity, not only with me, but with people out there listening, because somebody's going to listen to this and they're going to think, you know what, that Bob guy, I may not be him, but he's saying stuff that kind of resonates with me. So thank you for sharing that part of yourself. That is very appreciated.
Yeah.
The second part is I want you to take a moment and I want you to think of three things that you take away from this conversation. They can be good, they can be bad, but something that you're going to remember on Monday and maybe even longer.
This idea of writing a book, I think, is a good one because I have a lot of things I want to say, you know. obviously I reached out to you to be on your podcast. So I'm going to continue to think about it and talk to people about it and digest the idea. And second thing is I'm going to check with Amazon and see exactly what their services, how that works, you know. And the third thing is I'm going to enlist some others' help because I know a lot of people that have written books. I probably could reach out to you with a question and you'd be nice enough to answer.
Of course you could.
And so I'm going to do those three things.
It's not bad for a 40-minute conversation or whatever we ended up with.
Right.
It's even been a good time on my part, right?
Yeah. See?
It always is. So thank you. Thank you for the time, Rob.
Yeah. You changed my life. Thank you.
Oh, well, you changed mine, right? And most of all, made me think a little bit extra on something that I know I should have been thinking of, but it's always nice to get that poke.
Mm-hmm.
For all of our listeners out there, thank you for listening in and being our flies on the wall. You've heard Bob Carruthers. You've heard me, your host, Klaus Wostel. This has been the Innovation Coaching Podcast. Thank you for listening.